Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two and a Half Salesmen. I'm your host, Mario, together with my phenomenally looking host, Julio. Hey, Julio.
Hello, Mario. How you doing, mate?
I am doing excellent. It's July, it's vacation time, but it's always time to chat about sales. And we have a really interesting topic today, right?
We have actually probably one of my favorite topic in sales.
Okay. I didn't know that you're such a huge fan of it. Okay, nice, man. Well, so without further ado, and we don't want to tease you too long, the topic that we are addressing is psychology of sales, specifically what Julie and I are going to address today. And I've been guilty of many of these. I'm sure you have as well. It is the cognitive biases that are happening in B2B sales, specifically with sales reps, right? And in the next 30 or 40 minutes, we will try to address a fair amount of you, especially the ones that have kind of direct impact on your wallet, like on your ability to earn money, right?
Ooh. Money.
Yeah.
All right.
So
where should we start, sir?
Well, let's begin. Okay, so let's begin with one of what I've seen with reps, especially when doing coaching and mentoring and talking with them. This is something that is called availability heuristic, right? So this specific cognitive bias says that people have a tendency to favor certain information that they receive versus some other information that they get.
This
right?
is when the sales rep thinks, "Oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. You should buy it immediately." That's what you're talking about.
So not exactly, right? So what I'm talking about with the availability heuristic, it is reps tend to overestimate whatever information they have currently. So this is reflected in how they prepare for the discovery call, right? So what they would do is either they would take the notes from the SDR, or if they're full cycle, whatever conversation they had, and then they would look at a website, they would look at a person that is talking with them, and all of the information that they have, they will create a narrative or assumptions based on the information that they have, meaning they will not invest time and effort in actually doing the discovery call, if this makes sense.
Okay. I mean, absolutely does. I would say that I would have a simpler way to look at this, because the availability heuristic is also the idea that it's actually a very common psychological trick that like magicians use, for example, right? They try to make you recall a specific example, and if you do recall that, you tend to give it far more weight than you should do. So based on what you were saying, is that if the reps believe that they have solutions to the pain, what should really happen is that there should be, instead of assumptions, questions to validate that availability. And then the more you validate it, the more likely is the prospect to also understand whether there's actually enough evidence that this is a big problem. Because if they don't have that, then, and if you're asking questions about the pain and they don't resonate with that, chances are there ain't no pain.
It is as simple as that, right? One of the things that I see, I want to talk about two biases now that are so I don't want to call them, they're not similar, but they go hand in hand, right? And we can maybe spend a little bit more time here. So first, the one is the confirmation bias, which is very rampant, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners know what confirmation bias is, but just for this is a tendency to favor a certain piece of information that kind of confirms your pre-existing either values or beliefs.
It's kind of
Right?
why people vote almost always the same,
Yeah,
like right or left most of their life, right? Just
yeah,
they keep corroborating the beliefs that they have behind
yeah,
that.
yeah. Usually one of the consequences of confirmation bias is just ignoring new information that arises, especially either during demo or discovery call, or whenever you talk to the client, because you kind of have this set of beliefs that you're clinging into, that you're stuck with. And I will give you kind of a remedy how to find that.
I'll give an example, like racism is a rampant example, right?
Yeah.
We believed for so long that other races were inferior, and then science came up with like, well, no, guys, you're full of shit. And then we're still being racist today, even though there's literally zero scientific evidence behind it, we're still anchored to beliefs that have been going on for like, what, 1,000 years, maybe?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is, I would say, pretty rampant, and we can move a little bit away from racism into business, is that the notion that women are not good software developers.
Yeah.
Right, because it's kind of old boys club. However, for the historians listening to this call, well, most of the women were the first software developers / mathematicians in the early days of computing.
I didn't know that.
There were almost no men. I mean, most of the team of software developers that got us to the moon were female.
Oh, I did not
What
know.
happened?
Oh, yes, I did see that from there was a famous movie, right?
But what happened late 70s, early 80s, something that is called, well, with the rise of computing power, that came video games. And most of the video games were played by or marketed to the boys, right? So these boys then became men. And then most of software developers just kind of shifted to
Makes
men.
sense.
But this was not the case. Most of the developers were actually female. This is one of the confirmation biases, right? So in hiring, if you have two software developers, fairly same skill level, most hiring managers will favor the male.
Well, I mean, it's not. I would say there's many things. There's also social proof behind that. Obviously, if you have 90% of your team is men, and they are good, you'll automatically think the men are better at it. So there's a lot of things that. Well, this is more social proof. Social proof is like it's again still part of psychology, but it's the concept that will persuade us. But you mentioned there was another bias that you think went hand in hand with it.
Yes. So with the confirmation bias, hand in hand, what I've seen, especially training and coaching a whole lot of reps, is something that is called a sunken cost fallacy. Right. So this is also very similar to gambler's fallacy. Which means that when you invest a lot of time and effort in a deal, you are very hard to let go of that. So what this means is
that's why people don't divorce quickly enough, basically.
That's sunken fallacy is one of the reasons why people don't divorce. So this is why, let's say that you're running pipeline reviews as a manager, some of your reps would just drag the same deals month to month, quarter to quarter, because they don't want to let go, because they've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy. Well, time and energy equals money in wages paid and tech used, that they don't want to let go of a losing deal. The deals that will never close. Now, why they won't close, we can open up a topic regarding that. Maybe you did a bad discovery, maybe you didn't find a pain, maybe there is no pain, blah, 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 blah. Right? But we are at the stage, and this usually comes after you kind of beg your way into a demo.
Mhm.
And then you do the demo and you think the demo will kind of persuade him. And then you spend endless hours on follow-ups. Hey,
Mhm.
anything new? Any feedback for me? What is
Mhm.
happening? What? Ugh.
Mhm.
But reps just don't want to let go.
Mhm. Well, okay, so that this is like a way in which you can combine a confirmation bias with the sunken fallacy. But I would actually
Yes.
give something positive for people to work with, which is the confirmation bias is one of the reasons why it's hard to persuade someone that already has got a supplier, right?
Yeah.
Because they will obviously same exact logic. They already invested, they put the time, they train the new people, etc. Why switch from HubSpot to Salesforce, right? If you
Yeah.
already have
Yeah.
got all
Yeah.
that time invested.
Yeah.
However, a way that you can counter this is by pairing the confirmation bias with the negative bias.
Ah, okay. What do you mean?
So
So
by this,
just explain a little bit about, because I know the negative bias,
Mhm.
and I've used it, and if you guys are fans of Justin Michael's Rotary Multiply cold calling technique, the ruin part leans heavily on the negative bias
Mhm.
with very good reasons. So if you could
Mhm.
maybe just explain a little bit what negative bias
Mhm.
is.
So to put it very simply, the negative bias is we're basically more negative than positive as creatures. So we tend to go towards the negative of experiences, of situations, etc. And however, if you're the one that starts pointing the negative, you're going to trigger the confirmation bias, right?
Yes.
So the best way to go about it, in my experience, is instead to lean the opposite way.
Yes.
So be like, oh, you got HubSpot. Oh, I imagine everything is perfect with HubSpot. So why would you want to change? And that's when they'll be like, well, I mean, not everything is perfect. Like, it's not perfect. And then they if they bring it up themselves, then obviously the bias is countered. So they won't feel attacked in their existing beliefs because they are the
Exactly.
one criticizing, basically.
Exactly. So the way I love to leverage it is, again, I'm this is textbook JMM. Well, I use his, so that this is kind of the sentence that I love, is this: how is this working for you?
Mm-hmm.
And then when they say, oh, it's working fine, oh, fine, awesome. So what do you like about it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then literally after second or third sentence, they ride into the negative bias. So they
Mm-hmm.
ride into, well, basically talking what they don't like about the
Mm-hmm.
current way they're doing
Exactly. Exactly. And at this point, I think, and that's probably the biggest takeaway generally for sellers, is that if the prospect gets there himself, you have a
Yeah,
chance.
yeah,
Because if the prospects, and it will happen, the prospect is in like, look, to be honest, yeah, there's some problems here and there, but we don't care.
yeah.
That's your waving red flag to disqualify and move on, basically. I mean, you can maybe try some other avenue if you think that your value proposition is that strong, but because you shouldn't leave stones unturned, especially if you're on the phone with the person. But at that point, you definitely already see some very strong opposition to even attempting to close a deal.
Yes, yes. One of the things, and this is kind of bred into us from very early stages, and as a sales leader or sales manager, especially when running teams, very difficult to go around this. This is the confidence or overconfidence bias, right? So this is a kind of a tendency that we, as humans, think of ourselves as above average. So
Mm-hmm.
if you say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 5 is your average, where would you rate yourself in context of? And then you just put in a random topic.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone will say, oh, I'm a 7 or I'm an 8. So we tend to rate ourselves above
Mm-hmm.
average. So
Mm-hmm.
where does this play in? This is for all of you young managers, if you're listening. when doing pipeline reviews and sales projections. So we tend to be, how do I put this, not gently, overly optimistic when it comes to our own sales projections.
I mean, I remember that I came up with this rule when I was working in as a sales director, and it generally worked well for me for 8 years, which is whatever I was told, I would count 35%. Just as a general rule of thumb, I would be like, if my team was coming, oh, we got 300K left, I'd be like, okay, so we got like 130, and I would go to my manager with 130, and then at that point, I'd be like, are you sure it's that low? Like, maybe we'll squeeze a bit more. But I have never overestimated pipeline projections. I would always underestimate.
35% rule is awesome rule.
It's just like slashing it with a katana,
man.
basically.
Imagine coming in after a sales leader says, well, last quarter we had 1 million pipeline. What are you saying now? We have 300K in pipeline?
350. And I would hold to it. I'd be like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, I'm sure. Should I go talk to them? I was like, you can if you want to, but trust me. And then eventually, because my pipeline estimation was actually quite accurate, people just started believing it, you know. And then eventually you'll know that you have the person in the team that's better at estimation and blah blah blah. So eventually you get to better. But I always said a third, and he kind of gets it.
When I was a young sales manager, young sales leader, one of my second or third engagement as an executive, I really had an issue with sales forecasting. Like really, like I was super shit when it came to that. So what I did is, at the time, well, not now, my ex-wife worked at a bank. Well, she still works, but I've asked her to kind of introduce me to the guys that are doing financial forecasting there. And I just wanted to kind of have a coffee, just kind of to pick their brains of how are you doing that? What are you taking into account? What are you not taking into account? So I kind of took a little bit of lessons there, and you are very correct. I always kind of decreased. Oh, our target is 100K for this month. We're not going to hit that. We are going to be at 70K, 60, 70K, and always overshot it, but I would always kind of lower it.
Of course. I mean, but also kind of, I think this is where a lot of sales leaders get in trouble with their bosses, right? Is that I never understood this. Why would you prefer live like a lion the last week of the quarter and then have to be beaten like a sheep for the first month of the following quarter, rather than take it on board and just be like, look, we're not going to hit quarter, and start that like maybe 1-2 weeks before that. And then if you do hit quarter, oh, you're a bloody hero, you know. but I mean, for me, this always worked. There will be like some deal coming out of nowhere. It's like, and then I mean, the thing is, if you do this too much, then your boss eventually clocks it, and there would be times it come to me, it's like, you're gonna do more, aren't you? It's like, no, I promise that you're gonna do more. I know you're gonna do more. I'm gonna count that you do more.
Oh man.
But anyway, we're getting like as usual
sidetracked,
a bit sidetracked. Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk one of the biases. Well, one of the cognitive biases that is actually very useful in sales, I would say. And this is a technique I use for a long time. I'm sure you have been using it as well. It's called anchoring bias. Right? So this bias says that we as humans tend to favor or heavily rely on the first piece of information that we get regarding a certain topic. Right? And of course, with this, we can go all political. However, in sales, when you are asked about the price, I would always anchor high. Oh, we begin from 1 million, and then that can go lower.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is also quite famously quoted in Never Split the Difference, obviously. So that's definitely an important way to go about this. I would also say, just another spin to this, is that anchoring bias can be a real ball ache if you're selling the type of product or service that is a very competitive and not unique market. Because
if it's commoditized, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't have to be commoditized, but it's more like, let's say, an example that comes into my mind. I was watching some live cold calling from some of the guys that we have a meeting, and the guy comes up, oh, like we tried to start solution for this, and that, like they're still very much anchored, right? And then what I was taught by my mentor is, you go on the front foot with that, and you go be like, look, I'm sure if I'll tell you this is a SaaS solution, you'll tell me you already tried something like this and just are not open at all to try it again, right? And then at that point, you let them deal with their own objection as well, instead of starting with like, because at that point they can't say like, well, you're right. They can, but they won't, basically.
Yeah, this is so just a little bit of explanation here. What Julia just said. This is something in sales that we call pre-close, right? Yeah. So what you do is you kind of anticipate what would be some of the objections, and then you just kind of put them out there immediately, right? So
exactly.
So that they are deal with.
It's also the fact that when you name them, it doesn't leave the chance. Okay, let me give you a really stupid example. If I stole the cookies from the mom's jar, if I come across and tell her right away, Mom, you're probably going to hate me, I stole the cookies, then her anger is cut in half, right?
Yes.
And it's very similar. Like, this is, again, it is doing accusation audit, as well as according to Chris Voss, but there's different ways you can go about this to counter this bias as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about one bias that I would say has ruined, and I'm not saying this lightly, ruined generations of salespeople.
Oh.
So this is a part where we do a segment we will put in a snippet. You're probably watching it on LinkedIn.
I know exactly what you're talking about, the bandwagon effect, right?
I am talking about the bandwagon
Cold calling doesn't work. Cold calling doesn't work.
Oh, take these 10 templates, they convert. Use sales, LinkedIn sales automation with these 10 templates that will get a reply and fill your pipeline forever and ever and a day, and that's never. So what is the bandwagon effect? The bandwagon is affective bias that refers to our tendency to believe that just because a lot of people are doing something, that is something that is right. That is something that is working, right?
Yeah.
And we see the bandwagon effect all over us, right? In politics, in the only, I would say the only true remedy is the scientific approach, right? So trying to disprove on purpose whatever not preconceived notions, but whatever everyone thinks. I mean, there's a saying, I think, I will get this wrong, but maybe Mark Twain said it. Whenever you find yourself on the side of majority, it is time to pause and reflect. I think it was him. I'm not sure. I need to check that, right? So we've all seen HubSpot's templates. We've all seen our LinkedIn feeds are filled with get this template, this converts, get this technique, this works, right? And then I would say that we well, we can look at the results, right? So we can look at how many salespeople get their quota, how many salespeople achieve their quota, right? In
the
whether or
one
not
that
these are effective.
when the one they use templates always achieve their quotas according to LinkedIn. I mean, if it's on LinkedIn, it's gotta be true, right?
If it's on LinkedIn, it's gotta be true.
You can't tell me people lie on LinkedIn, right? That's just can be.
Oh, dude, they heavily do. Like I've seen SDRs just Google best sales templates and they put them in like a 6 email sequence or 4 email sequence or whatever the fuck they're doing without actually lifting a fucking brain cell and thinking what they're doing. And same goes for LinkedIn. And the same goes for the few that do cold calling. They would just find templates and just babble the fucking script without actually engaging in meaningful conversation. Just because this guy said it and this guy got 150 reposts, 1,000 comments, and so on.
True. I mean, I remember when the one that annoys me the most are there's so much hating on leadership, for example, right? As if being a sales leader was such an easy job, right? and sometimes they'll be like, oh, you should let your employee do this and that and blah blah blah. One that made me laugh was about homeworking. Someone said, how could you possibly argue that everyone is going to be as productive from home as from the office? That just doesn't make. I mean, can people be? Of course. Will everyone? Of course not.
Of course not.
Most people that are self-aware know I can't be in an office environment because I get distracted. Right, sure. But most of the time, I can't be at home because I'll be distracted by everything. I get distracted by everything.
Like right now, come here. And hello, dear audience. Let me introduce to my distraction here. Right? So she just came in and rang the bell. If you heard it, she rang the bell. So this is another distraction when you're working from home. Right? For us who have kids and teenagers.
But yeah, indeed. There's a lot of basically the bottom line is don't trust what's on LinkedIn necessarily just because you see a bunch of people liking and resharing.
So what you should put your trust in are frameworks.
Tested frameworks.
Tested frameworks. That's number one. But also take it with a grain of salt, right? So you take a framework, you put your very unique content in it, and then test it and see what's working, what is not working.
Right? I would also say, like, one thing that usually you can trust more is when many different people talk about similar things in a similar way. Then you start to get like, for example, I didn't trust the emails should be much shorter until I saw Lemlist, Lavender, email marketing expert. Everyone started to talk about the same type of information. Then I'm like, okay, this sounds more trustworthy than
but most of it again. So when it comes to the emails, and this is a fun fact, and shout out to our friend Justin Michael, he actually came up with the 3-sentence email, right? So you just run 3 sentences, you optimize it for mobile phone, and you
there we go.
Right?
Exactly.
Cool. Well, this was a fun episode, my friend.
Indeed.
Well, let's what do you think we do a little bit of recap of what we talked about, just kind of to give the audience
Absolutely. I mean, my recap is actually quite simple because I don't know.
I kind of wanted to go through whatever biases that we mentioned, but you can do a recap and I'll just mention the biases
I'm not going to talk about the biases. I'm actually going to say buy some psychology books if you want to be better sales. Read about psychology instead of sure. Like this podcast will help, but you need to do this on your own as well in order to get better at it.
Yeah, I will just quickly run us through again for what we talked. So we talked about anchoring bias, very good in price. We did a whole episode on price negotiation. So anchor bias, that confirmation bias. Try to be like an open book. My technique is when I will read upon everything that I can on my prospect or whoever is on the call. But when I'm actually talking, I kind of have a blank page, and then I kind of write in the answers that I'm getting. So kind of a mental exercise for me. Then we talked about availability heuristics. We talked about the bandwagon effect, which is just rampant in the, I mean, sales is a copycat industry, I would say, right? So we talked about overconfidence bias. We talked about sunk cost fallacy, where you're not able to let go. And then the negativity bias, which you can actually leverage very effectively.
Perfect.
So, ladies and gentlemen watching us, we have a surprise guest for next week. This is my dear friend. He's just completed an exit to Accenture as a CRO for 150 million. One of the coolest guys I ever talked to. I've met him in person a few weeks ago in Zagreb. So we're gonna be talking a lot about modern sales. He's very accomplished and very, very successful. So I am really looking forward to next week's episode.
Excellent. See you guys next week.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Ciao.